Grade Science, this is Miss Satterley here. I'm going to make a video about the PowerPoint over physical properties so you guys can review. So what is a physical property? A physical property is any characteristic of a material that can be observed without changing the composition of the substance. So in this slideshow, we have 7 different types of physical properties. We have viscosity, malleability, melting point, density, conductivity, hardness, and boiling point. One of the attendance assignments we also had, I wanted you to look up ductility and luster. So ductility is the ability of a substance to be drawn into a wire. Metals are usually ductile, and nonmetals would be what we call brittle, which means they break, and that's in this PowerPoint. Luster has to do with the way light reflects off of a material's surface, and there's different types of lusters. So first is viscosity. Viscosity is a resistance to flow. Viscosity can also be described as the tendency of a liquid to keep from flowing. The greater the viscosity of a substance, the slower the movement's going to be. So if you have an example and you're thinking about vinegar and honey, vinegar, if you pour it out of a bottle, it's going to be very fluid. It's going to pour out very quickly. So it has a low viscosity, while honey, if you try to pour out of a bottle, it's much slower. It takes longer to get to the opening of the bottle, and it's difficult to pour out. So that means honey has a high viscosity. Viscosity will actually decrease when heated. So if you take some corn syrup or honey and you heat it up, it's going to be able to flow much more quickly, and that's because the viscosity is going to decrease when heated. There is one substance that doesn't follow these normal behaviors. It's called a non-Newtonian fluid, which means it actually doesn't go with heat to affect its viscosity. It has to do with pressure. And cornstarch and water is a very good example of this. So when you apply pressure to these types of fluids, they actually will turn almost solid, and that's because their viscosity is increasing with pressure. Next one is conductivity. Conductivity is the material's ability to allow heat to flow. And metals are going to be good conductors. A conductor is a material that has a high conductivity. So conductors are going to let heat or energy flow through them. And we use these in wiring. Also, if you're cooking, you're going to also always cook with a metal pot, and that's because the metal allows the heat to transfer through. Malleability is our next physical property. Malleability is the ability of a solid to be hammered without shattering. Also, it can be referred to as the ability to be molded into a shape. So metals have a high malleability. They're able to be molded into different shapes. You can actually hammer out some metals into thin sheets, such as aluminum, to make aluminum foil. Brittle is going to be the opposite of malleability. Brittle is when you use that word to describe materials that will shatter when struck. So if you have a piece of chalk and you take a hammer to this piece of chalk, you cannot make a thin sheet of chalk. You're actually going to end up with a bunch of crumbles. Hardness is our next one. Hardness is the ability to resist being scratched. When a material has a higher hardness, it's able to scratch another material. There's actually something called the Mohs scale of hardness that has 10 different substances that we've given values of 1 through 10. Diamond is the hardest substance that has a Mohs value of 10, while talc is the lowest substance with a value of only 1. So if you have a diamond, or quartz is also on that list, it's number 7. If you have quartz and you have talc, you're going to actually scratch the surface of talc with that piece of quartz because it has a lower hardness. So that's what hardness is. Melting point. Melting point is the temperature at which a substance changes from a solid to a liquid. Now, different materials are going to have different melting points depending on their own properties. In the picture here, we have a picture of the metal gallium. Gallium actually has a very low melting point, so your body heat is high enough to cause it to melt into your hand. So that is what's happening in that picture right there. Our next one is boiling point. Boiling point is the temperature at which a substance changes from a liquid to a gas. I'm going to use water as an example here. So we have water being boiled on the stove. Water has a boiling point of 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit. So that is changing from a liquid form into its vapor form. Next one is density. Density is the ratio of mass of a substance to its volume. Substances that have lower densities are going to float on top of substances that have greater densities. So the classic example of that is water and oil. If you try to mix water and oil, they will not mix together. This is because water is a polar substance and oil is actually what we call a nonpolar substance, so they don't like to mix together. Oil has a density that's lower than water. Water's density is 1, and we use that to determine the different densities of other substances, while oil's density is less than that. So that's why it will float on top of water and separate. Now, uses of physical properties. Physical properties can be used to identify the type of material. So different properties are going to, or different materials are going to have different melting points, boiling points, hardness levels, conductivity, malleability, and all of these things. We also can use it to choose a material for a specific purpose. So if you want to make something where you need a good conductor of heat, you're going to look at the conductivity of material and choose that way. Also, you can separate substances into a mixture or in a mixture, and there's 2 different processes that I'm going to talk about next. First one is called filtration. Filtration is the process that separates materials based on the size of their particles. So the picture here, we have a mixture of water and sand, and this is actually a funnel that will have a filter paper placed on top of it. And you pour the water and sand mixture into the funnel, and the sand is too large to get through the filter paper, but the water isn't. So therefore, you will be able to separate using filtration. So this is when you separate things based on their particle size. Distillation is another type of way to separate substances. Distillation is a process that separates substances based on their boiling point. So, an example that I had in one of the attendance questions asked you, how would you separate fresh water and salt water? Fresh water and salt water have different boiling points, so distillation is a way to separate those 2 different substances. So, in the picture here, we actually have an apparatus that you will use for distillation purposes. So, this is a special chamber that's made of glass, and there's a tube that comes out the side that you can connect to a test tube with a stopper. The Bunsen burner right here will heat the substance, and materials that have a lower boiling point are going to boil off first, and then you can collect them over here in this chamber right here. Now, physical change. Physical change occurs when some of the properties in a material change, but substances remain the same. So physical properties are usually reversed. And when you have a physical change, your properties are going to remain the same. So the example here is a broken pencil. If you break a pencil in half, you're not going to be able to put that pencil back together the same way because it is broken, but you haven't changed the physical properties of the pencil. It's still made of wood and it's still made of graphite. So I want to just go over one more thing before we're done with this video. First off, any kind of physical property, the thing with physical properties is they are not going to change the chemical composition of the material. They are just going to indicate what that material is like. So that's what physical properties are. The next video we're going to have is going to be over the chemical properties. So please review this video. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks.